Welcome to a very special and festive Freshet Friday podcast. I'm your host, Geof Wheelwright, and I, along with the rest of the Freshet News team, am in a particularly good mood today, as it's the 6-month birthday of our Freshet News website. I have to say, it's been a particularly good 6-month-old, and not keeping us up too late at night too often, and learning to talk pretty quickly. But before I bend this analogy completely out of shape, I'll turn to what's coming up on the show. Today, we're going to tell you what's in a Burnaby scramble, why underwater plumbers were in the news, what the opening of a new pedestrian cycle bridge will mean for local cyclists, and a whole lot more. Here to tell us all about these stories are Freshet News reporters and founders, Mario Bartell, Janice Cleugh, Theresa McManus, and Cornelia Naylor. Happy birthday, everybody!
Hey, Geoff.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, Geoff.
To kick off the celebrations, why don't we recap for our listeners how our journey started and then talk a little about what we've learned along the way. Mario, do you want to kick us off?
Well, how it started was a Friday afternoon in February. We all have an email land in our inbox at around 2 p.m. Announcing that our publications were being closed by Glacier Media. I think we were all in a bit of shock and dismay. These publications have been around for a long time, and we've been a part of these publications for a long time. And we were all sort of at a loss for a while and didn't know what was going to come next, not only for ourselves, but also for the communities, because we'd seen other communities lose their local news. We'd seen all these communities used to have 2 papers that were vibrant and publishing up to 3 times a week, going toe-to-toe with each other for getting stories first and getting stories best and having the best-looking photos in them. And here we were suddenly facing the prospect of nothing.
What a moment. And so you want to pick up the story, Cornelia, from there?
Well, we were all kind of preparing to go our own way, I think. We're, sprucing up our resumes and considering the move to the dark side, i.e. communications, or what other kinds of journalism work were out there. And then we were approached by a co-op developer who pitched the idea of launching a co-op. And so we met and we thought that was a good idea. I mean, obviously, at first, it's hard to throw your whole heart into something that's just so, it's such a big idea and it's so abstract. So, we still, I can speak only for myself, but I mean, I was still looking at other jobs and that kind of thing. But the more we met, the more excited I became about this idea. And then we started being more serious about it, launching a fundraising campaign and starting to get out into the community and finding out what the loss of these papers meant to community members who told us over and over again they didn't know what was going on in their communities, that they wanted to, just basic events, and that they didn't know what was going on in their public institutions like City Hall and school board and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I think it was that feedback that we were getting. I don't know about you guys, but that feedback we were getting talking to the people in the community that really sort of drove us forward, that we kind of have to do this. It was something that felt like an abstract idea, but as we started to hear that and gain that appreciation from people because when you're working in the corporate side media, you're not really valued. The message we got time and time again, and it shows in the way they told us how we were closing, was that, you're lucky to have a job. There's dozens of kids coming out of journalism school every year who would do this for less money than we're having to pay you. So just, put your head down, be quiet, and take what you get. But as we heard from the community how much they appreciated our work and valued our work, I think that kind of gave us the energy to really hunker down and see this through and see what could come of it. We had no idea, and I think we still are a little bit in the dark as to where this can go. But the more we do it, the more we see that there is a future here, there's a viability here, and there's a demand here.
And sometimes when you're doing the job, you don't realize, it's a job, and you don't realize how important the work is for the community. In some ways, having to spread the word and say, hey, we're starting a new paper. I had to look into some reports and some research that talked about just how important local news is for democracy, for example, and for keeping communities together, keeping them from becoming polarized, on social media and not having any common stories that are being told for them. So it's one of those ones where you kind of start believing your own press a little bit in terms of how important local news is.
But, your comment about democracy all of this happened in the middle of an election, or at that point, it was an upcoming election. And Janice, you've spoken about this. In fact, you spoke to the parliamentary committee about that.
Yeah, Mary and I went to Ottawa and we made it quite clear that, having news deserts and news poor jurisdictions is not cool. People are disconnected and there's a loss of community. So we wanted to make sure that was brought forward to the parliamentarians, that we had no news and we were directly outside of Vancouver, which is a very large municipality. We have the largest port in North America in terms of volume. And so, what flows through our communities is very important.
Yeah, everybody's sounding very Canadian. Mary, you were talking about being dismayed. Janice, how about you? How did this land for you? And how did, the speed of it is what impresses me. I mean, you go from being laid off end of February, and all of a sudden, by the middle of October, there's this news site, and then shortly after that, there's a paper.
And then we go to Ottawa. I mean, all within a year. It's incredible. Our growth has been very fast. The starting point on October 7th, we got our incorporation. A week later, we had a news site out, as well as a newsletter. And come December, we had our first printed edition. So now we're rolling out with 2 editions per month, and things are scaling up even more.
The whole experience, I would say, in some ways has been like, a fire hose of information coming at us. We have said time and time again that the words that we sort of defined our first beginnings were pivoting, and that's something that we had to do a lot of, and capacity. And there is just the 4 of us that are doing most of the writing right now. So it really has been a challenge. But I think that the thing that has kept me going is that community feedback that Mario has talked about. When we go to the farmers markets and the pride festivals and people tell us that they need this, that they want this in their communities, that to me has just been sort of the thing that's kept me going forward when it's been tough at times. So thankfully we've got that support in the community, and that really is what keeps me motivated.
And I think as journalists too, we're sort of hardwired to change on a dime and adjust and adapt quickly, because you're doing that every day in your day-to-day work, covering stories where, one minute you're doing a hard-hitting council story or sitting through a dull meeting. The next minute you're talking to some community member about some really noteworthy project or passion project that they're involved in. You're always changing gears every day. You're shifting and adjusting and learning things on the fly. So I think as journalists, we're discovering we're kind of uniquely qualified to do a lot of things, and we're kind of doing this all, as Cornelia says, we're doing it on the fly, and it's, we've made a few missteps along the way, but for the most part, we're always able to drive forward, and who knows where this will end up. We hope this can be a model for other news deprived communities or that still have journalists who want to share stories in them to take the leap and see what can come. And we're fortunate we've had some great people to guide us along the way. People like yourself, Geof, who've offered their assistance and knowledge and experience to help us on some of the things we don't know anything about. So it's pretty cool. There's times where you sort of, I don't know about my colleagues here, but you sort of sit down, you kind of shake your head and say, I can't believe we've come this far this quickly. And it's a ride for sure. It's kind of interesting to see how it'll all play out.
Yeah, I remember many days as a reporter going into a newsroom and like, okay, I don't know what story I'm going to be working on today, but I got to know a little bit about this. And I could see how that's helpful in the current circumstance. But the thing that's different here is some of the time you have been the story. The work that the 4 of you were doing has got a lot of attention. I mean, there was the parliamentary committee, but you've also been interviewed by a lot of other journalists. And I got to wonder how that's felt for you.
It's just really uncomfortable to be the person who's having to answer the questions, because we know what we would be looking for in an interview and the quotes and all that. And it's nerve-wracking. It gives me a new appreciation for the people that I interview every day. But I mean, it's easy to talk about the project because we believe in it and because we know it so thoroughly. Any one of us could talk off the cuff and tell you all about what we're doing, because everything we do is by consensus and we're all in on all of the important decisions that we're making. And and we're passionate about it. So it's easy to talk about, but again, unnerving to be on the other side of the microphone, if you will.
Well, I think it also feeds that sort of sense of mission that this project has taken on. That, like I said, if we can make this work, if we can show it's viable and it's doable, other communities will jump in too. I mean, I think, as I said in a previous podcast, the Metroland papers around Metro Toronto that all went digital only back in September 2023, shortly after Glacier made us digital only. They're starting to go back to print, and they're following the exact same model we're doing, once a month. Distribution into community hubs. So we followed a model that someone else had developed. And so, there are ways to overcome this sort of throw up their arms and that the corporate media is doing, saying, oh, well, it doesn't work anymore, let's blame the internet. There are ways, and the communities are showing that they want these things to be available to them.
And beyond getting ourselves up and running and sustainable is all of us are really excited about the idea of just doing this better, bringing more reporters online, more resources, covering these stories really well. And like Mario said, being a model for other communities, bringing back newspapers. Once we are running like a well-oiled machine and we have enough people to cover these areas, we'd love to be able to influence and motivate and inspire people in other communities that have lost their local news.
One of the points we were making earlier was around elections and the fact that, the newspapers you were all on before you started this project folded just in the middle or just before the federal election. Well, now we've got local elections coming up in our communities this fall. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about what your approach is going to be for how you want to cover these elections.
Thoroughly. As thoroughly as possible. There's nothing more exciting, I think, for local journalists or local newspapers than a local election, because that's what we're best at. We know these people. We've covered city council. We've covered school board. We know all the players so well. I mean, we recognize them on sight. I mean, we don't have to ask who's that person or who's that person. And any new candidate that comes along, we're going to be able to understand them and what their and hopefully what their background is in the community.
Local elections don't have sort of the sexy cachet of the prime minister rolling into town on a bus and all the media climbing off, and there you're rubbing shoulders with national reporters and national photographers. But the things that are being talked about at the local level, when you go to an all candidates meeting or you do interviews with the candidates, they're the things that are going to affect people the most in their day-to-day life. They're the decisions. That's where the decisions are made that will impact how their neighborhood is going to evolve, what traffic is going to be like, and how it's going to be managed through their community, what the city can do to try and create a good retail environment or commercial environment for businesses. All those decisions happen at the local level. And the candidates are talking about issues that affect people every day, very locally, in their backyards, on their doorsteps. Whereas, a federal and provincial election, those candidates are always always giving their talking points of their party, and it gets to be a little bit repetitive. And you're going in there and you're talking to them. You're trying to get them to speak about something local that matters to our readers. Yet they're going to be talking about whatever national issue they want to be talking about at that point in the election. So it's not sexy, but it's really important.
So, switching gears, Cornelia, I want to turn to you and I want to talk about this Burnaby pedestrian scramble. I mean, it kind of sounds to me like the daily special at a breakfast diner on Kingsway, but tell us why it's not that and how it's actually going to work.
It is not that. It's an interesting pedestrian crossing that will be built in the Kingsway neighborhood, Kingsway area, Metrotown. I found this tucked in a report in the Transportation Committee last week. For those who don't know what a pedestrian scramble is, it is where an intersection where all the traffic in all directions is halted, stopped at the same time, and pedestrians cross the street every which way, and including diagonally. They can cross in every direction. And the appeal of those kinds of crossings is that there's no pedestrian vehicle conflict, and the decisions on the part of the drivers is simplified. They don't have to think about anything. They just know they have to stop. The first one I think I ever encountered was in Toronto. I think it's Yonge and Dundas. I'm not a Toronto person, so I don't know, but I think that's where I thought it was really cool. I love the idea. It's almost it feels kind of community-ish. Hey, we all get to cross, and the big crowd is like going all over the place. And despite the word scramble, one staff member who was presenting this, answering questions from Councillor Richard Lee, who was asking about seniors and whether they'd have enough time to cross or whether they'd have to hurry up and take the shortest route. The staff member reassured him that people of all abilities and all ages should have enough time to cross, even diagonally, even the long way around. So anyway, I guess I haven't talked about even where this is going to go. It's going to go on Central Boulevard at the Metrotown Mall underground parkade access. And staff said that that's a key connection, high traffic volumes for both pedestrians and vehicles that are going to the mall, the SkyTrain, and the bus loop there, and that there have been safety concerns raised by the mall and by the public. The design is already underway, and the pedestrian scramble could be in place by the summer. And if you're interested and motivated, you can visit go online, look at the video for the April 8th Transportation Committee meeting and see a little cartoon simulation of how it will work.
Or you can just go to New West, where every day it seems like every intersection is a pedestrian scramble at times.
New West actually did consider creating a pedestrian scramble up at 6th and 6th.
That would have been great.
Would have been great, but the engineers found that it just would not work. So it never happened here. So I'm a little jealous. When I was recently in Los Angeles, I saw my first pedestrian scramble, and like the total civic affairs nerd that I am, I got out my phone and started videotaping it and was very excited that there was a pedestrian scramble that they couldn't build in New West.
So just clarify for me, pedestrian scramble, so everybody can go every which way, and that's fine for the pedestrians, but that's not going to work for the cars. So I'm assuming there's a period where all the pedestrians can go scramble themselves, but then there's a period where the cars in one direction stop, and then another period where the cars in the other direction stop, and then we're scrambling again. Is that?
Well, that's why it's called a pedestrian scramble, Jeff, and not a traffic scramble.
Yeah, no, pretty interesting
cars and
to watch,
vehicles are not allowed to scramble in the intersection.
Speaking of New West, we do have traffic scrambles.
No, and that's right. Actually, I forgot to mention that. I should definitely have clarified that. Once the pedestrian scramble phase of the traffic light is over, the traffic proceeds as normal. So there'll be red lights in one direction, green lights in the other, and then and then it'll switch over for the other traffic to go. But there'll also be, I should have mentioned also that there'll be other safety upgrades at that intersection.
So can the pedestrians still cross in one direction or the other when they're not scrambling?
No, the pedestrians will have to wait until it's their turn to scramble. That's right. the whole premise is that it simplifies the decisions for drivers. So one of the problems with this intersection is right turning vehicles. And them interfering with pedestrians. If you know you can't go, if you know you can't go when there are pedestrians at all, you know how you get to a busy intersection in downtown Vancouver and you're waiting forever to turn right because there are pedestrians crossing. That's what this is avoiding. You can't go. It's the pedestrian scramble time, so the vehicles have to stop.
So the next story I want to turn to is from Janice, and this kind of caught my eye because it's a story all about inspecting pipes under Burrard Inlet, which doesn't sound very exciting, but the mechanics of actually having to do this, I thought were pretty interesting because you've got people in diving suits wrestling with rusty valve handles and trying to make sure that everything's working the way that it should. So, Janice, can you tell us a bit about this?
It's a relatively new system. We had twin pipes go under the water under Burrard Inlet to bring drinking water from the district of Belcarra, basically Deep Cove, to Midden Road in Belcarra. If you're covering the village of Belcarra, you need to be an engineer because everything has to do with infrastructure. It's a very small village. And a lot of the topics are concerning water and roads, and specifically firefighting because it's surrounded by trees. So this drinking water system came in 2014. They have to do an inspection every 5 years. And the last inspection was done in August. They went down and they saw that some of the handles that were degraded from the salt water, couldn't move, so they went back down again last month, and they used a pipe wrench to turn these handles, and they moved fine. So the next inspection is until 2030, and they will be replacing the handles with a different material. In the village of Belcarra, you've got this new system, the drinking water system. Most of them had been on wells previously, and some were still on wells. But the water system for drinking specifically comes from North Vancouver through the Greater Vancouver Water. You also have the Belcarra Lake water system, which is separate from the drinking water system. That's designed for non-potable systems like flush your toilet. And further, you've got the Tatlow Row Reservoir, which is the water used for firefighting. So water is very important in Belcarra.
Well, and it sounds like they found the way around the rusty valve handles. I mean, I just had these images of like people in diving suits sitting, trying to argue with these valve handles. It just seemed like a tricky situation to be in. I also wanted to ask you, Janice, about another tricky situation, and this kind of reminded me of when my kids were young. My daughter had to go to a lot of dance recitals, and sometimes we'd get there and like there was really nothing around. So I remember we went to this one, and it was at a school, and so my sons and I were outside, and I was trying to think, well, what can I do with them? And there's a park there, but there was no equipment there. So I decided to invent the game of pinecone baseball. So that there was like some big stick on the ground. So I said, okay, we're going to make that the bat, and we can make these pine cones can be the ball. It's not the safest thing to do. But when I saw your story about how Quitlam's installing equipment stations at parks, I was thinking, oh, yes, no more pine cone baseball. This would be excellent. So can you tell us about these equipment stations?
Sure. To be clear, it's the city of Coquitlam, and they've partnered with Equip Sport, which is a Swiss company, and Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities, and they've installed 20 of these stations with various frisbees and soccer balls and sporting equipment is designed for spontaneous play. So when you do go to the park, the equipment's there. All you have to do is download an app and type in your details, and sure enough, the door opens up, and then you pick the shelf that you want. And you've got that equipment for about an hour. You can extend it. It's for free. It's no problem. In the city council, we had a councilor named Terry Towner, and she talked about how she went to Como Lake Park, and she met a woman, totally unprompted, came up to her and said, "Isn't this great that we got one of these stations here? And now my sons can come over to Como Lake Park and kick a ball." So Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, also has it. And it's coming around in other cities. They're basically blue stations, and they're just filled with sporting equipment, and it's good to get the kids out.
And it's going in 14 parks, right?
14 parks, 20 parks. Sorry, 14 parks, 20 stations, and there's room for expansion, obviously.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mario, now I'm going to turn to you. Now, I noticed you've got your cycling hat on, the Tour de France hat. And that's relevant because I want to ask you about the opening of the pedestrian cycle bridge in Burnaby. And as you've noted, it's kind of a big deal, and you've been following it for years. So tell us about it and the journey to get there.
Well, I've been following it as a cyclist. Cornelia's been following it as a journalist, so she can speak to the bureaucratic journey of the bridge. I know myself and the group of cyclists I ride with, we went down there last Saturday to check it out, and it was open. They'd taken the bollards down and the fencing away. It'd been unofficially open for quite some time, I think. People were just going across while they were still doing a little bit of touch-up work on it. And yeah, as a cyclist, Burnaby is often a topic of conversation because its trail and cycling route network can be kind of wonky. There's inexplicable ends to cycling routes. There's cycling routes that seem to go in places that don't make any sense. And they've been doing a lot of work in the last several years to try and correct some of those mistakes of the past and for cycling, the connection between routes is the most important thing. And what this bridge does, it's a pretty important connection between two major east-west thoroughfares that we often use, and I use myself too, the Central Valley Greenway and the trail that runs underneath the SkyTrain Guideway. And living in New West, we often head out on one of those routes if we're heading west towards Vancouver. And now it's a pretty easy ride down either the Buckingham Hill, which is a lot of fun, or other back roads to get down to the bridge. And then you can just hop over the Highway 1. Then you're into Burnaby Lake Regional Park, and it's a nice quiet road there that will then connect you to the Central Valley Greenway over another overpass that the city installed several years ago over the railroad tracks there. So it makes, as I've ridden more in the Lower Mainland, you really come to appreciate the cycling network that is out there, and that we actually live in a pretty good part of the world for getting around on bikes and not having to stress about traffic. There's still some gaps, and there are several gaps in Burnaby. In the cycling community, one of as we talked about the bridge, it was brought up, like there's the Kensington overpass, and there's a cycling path along there on one side that is wide and well used, but there's a lot of interactions with traffic along that way. So it can be a little bit precarious, especially if you're riding with younger riders or riders who aren't as confident about those kind of situations. So having this bridge it's a bit of a game changer, and it's nice that they've made the investment on it. And hopefully we saw a lot of people running across it, and other riders have been going across it. So I think it's going to get well used.
Well, that's fantastic. And Cornelia, can you talk a little bit about the other kind of journey to get there?
Yeah, I've been interested in this bridge for before, but I feel like even before it was a gleam in some parks and recreation person's mind or eye. People who've worked with me for a while know I'm obsessed with Highway 1 and how it's defined the character of Burnaby. I swear I'm going to write that big feature one day about that. And I know that even back, I think it was the 60s, after the highway was complete in the 60s. And they had even toyed around with the idea of having a tunnel under the, connecting the park, the different park areas, Robert Burnaby Park and Burnaby Lake Park and Deer Lake Park, and it considered a tunnel back in the day. So when this came up, I was really excited to hear about it. So yeah, it's, for those who don't know, it's a pedestrian cyclist bridge that it connects the trailhead at Glen Cairn Drive and Burnaby Lake Park and Claude Avenue on the I guess that's the south side, right? And it was moved into place in October with they shut down the entire highway. It was quite the rigmarole and logistic process. Moved it into place. It's 350 tons, and they moved it into place with 2 self-propelled platforms. And I was told by staff that they wouldn't be able to open it for a while. They needed to do testing on it and that kind of thing. Recently on Reddit, there had been questions about when are they going to open this thing. So I reached out to the city and was told that it wasn't going to be until the end of this month, the end of April. And then Mario tells me that they've actually taken the bollards and tape or whatever else, fencing, whatever was keeping people off of it. And it turns out that it's one of those situations of if you build it, they'll come, and maybe a little too soon. So they decided to just take all the stuff down, have a quiet, soft launch opening, and then have some official opening for the different funding parties, the feds and the province, sometime later this month.
Fantastic. So thank you, Cornelia. Thank you, Mario, for that great story about both sides of the story and both sides of the bridge of the story. About the new cycling bridge. I wanted to turn to something a little bit more serious now, and turning to you, Janice. I was fascinated by the story you had this week about how, as part of the April 28th day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job, New Westminster and District Labour Councils working to get employers to go further than acknowledging just physical injuries and fatalities in the workplace, looking at hidden hazards such as stress, anxiety, and burnout, and how they're also occupational psychological hazards that need to be treated the same as visible injuries. So do you want us to tell us a bit about that initiative, Janice?
Yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth. So basically every year, the newest district and labor council goes to the municipal councils, and asks for a moment of silence and recognition in honor of the people who have been injured and have died as a result of the workplace. There is an event on April 28th, which is the day of mourning, National Day of Mourning, and it's between the council and the city of New Westminster, and they will have this event at 11 o'clock at the Westminster Pier Park. And this is a free event. essentially the council delegates come and raise awareness. They build awareness about struggles that people face in the workplace physically, and this year they're really pushing the psychological harms that have been done as a result of working in the workplace. During the council meeting in Coquitlam, the mayor shared his own personal struggles about his pressures in the workplace, and he has had a diagnosis of major depression and anxiety. He said, and he's created a local leaders mental health group to bond with other local leaders about how difficult the job is. Not physically, but there is a lot of stress in the workplace. Anyway, that is their campaign for this year. They did mention about the 7 crane deaths in the past 5 years of British Columbia. And I do want to give a shout out to Josh Towsley. He is a Port Coquitlam resident. He is on the WorkSafe BC Board of Directors and the IUOE Local 115. And he is a Port Coquitlam resident. He's raising a lot of information about the crane safety, and he will be quite prominent coming up in the next 2 weeks about how to be safe in the workplace.
I'll just add there, if I can, that the Westminster Pier Park site is quite an emotional spot for some of the folks who do attend that annual memorial, because it's where 4 workers actually died in a confined space on a barge back in 2003. So it's considered to be a very appropriate site for where they hold that memorial.
Clearly, all of these communities have been touched by worker deaths or deaths in the workplace. I just wrote a story today about a sentencing in relation to a worker death in Burnaby in 2012, and it's taken this long to resolve the matter. It was a 28-year-old pipe layer who died after he was crushed to death in a trench when a retaining wall collapsed on him, and his coworkers were injured as well. And just today, J. Cote and Son Excavating was fined $575,000 after being found criminally negligent in the case. And it was a rare conviction under the Westray Amendment, which to the criminal code, which came after the Westray mine disaster. So it was important for that reason. And after so many years, after more than 13 years, closure for the families in that case.
Wow. Well, thank you all for those. I wanted to turn now to a story coming from our letters page. We now are seeing more and more readers are writing in, and we've got an active letters page. And there was a letter about the new Westminster bylaw on indoor heating. And Theresa, I know you've been covering this one fairly closely. So you want to tell us a little bit about that bylaw and what it'll mean for people this summer?
Well, the letter was from Aggie Black. She's a retired registered nurse, and she was, in her letter, she was commending City Council for passing a bylaw about indoor heat. And what that's going to do is it's going to require landlords to provide at least one cool room in an apartment. So the motivation for this bylaw really did come from the heat dome that we experienced back in 2021. 33 people in New Westminster died, one of the hardest hit cities in the province. Councillor Nadine Nakagawa says that, to the best of her knowledge, that New Westminster will be the first city in Canada to take this move to protect renters against extreme heat. City's trying to provide some flexibility within its bylaw, recognizing that not everything's going to work for, different buildings. How soon it will actually take effect, I'm not certain on that. It's going to require some investment from the building owners. But I do know that some folks, like with the tenants union, they've been quite supportive of this and had come to council because, as I say, New Westminster was really impacted by the heat dome. And as some folks are saying, this is just going to continue into the future. I did actually live for many years in one of those 3-story walk-ups in the Brow of the Hill neighborhood where many of these deaths occurred, and it got hot.
What? And it's a staggering number for a relatively small community, 33 people.
I remember at the time, like, when, being at council meetings and you know, council members and the mayor at the time were very emotional talking about this. This was a horrifying time for the city. Firefighters and police officers, just it was a really, really, really sad time. People were very emotional when they were talking about that several days where, it was 40 degrees. So
Yeah. And that was also the second summer of COVID as well.
yes. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Theresa. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on that story. The final story we have in our first block here is talking about seeing the forest for the trees in Port Moody. And I'm hoping Mario can talk about the city getting recognized by the Arbor Day Foundation and giving away some free trees.
Well, yeah, the city sent out a press release a couple of weeks ago that it had been recognized by an organization called the Arbor Day Foundation. It works with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, and they have a program that recognizes cities around the world for their efforts to maintain and grow their urban forest, their tree canopy. And the tree canopy, it follows nicely that we're after Theresa talking about the impact of the heat dome in New Westminster. It's often the part of the conversation in Port Moody too, and it's a city that takes great pride in its natural environs around the head of the Burrard Inlet and the backdrop of the mountains on its north shore and the trees and that. The city is very conscious of how important it is to maintain an urban forest canopy to try and mitigate some of the effects of hot weather. And we're seeing with climate change, we're getting hotter and hotter days in the summer, and those days are extending into weeks at times. And there's nothing finer in that situation than be able to go outside and sit in the shade of a tree with a cool breeze coming off the waters of Burrard Inlet. So the city's been it's made growing, increasing its tree canopy part of its strategy going forward and its official community plan for 2050. And so it's pretty proud of getting this kind of recognition. I mean, it's one of, I think this year they named 283 cities in 24 countries around the world. And they basically, I mean, it's not like winning the World Cup. It's not like it's a competition. Cities apply, they show what sort of programs they've been doing to maintain their trees and encourage residents to preserve trees, and what sort of city policies are to preserve trees. And if they meet all those criteria, then and satisfy the committee that looks at these things, they get this honor. So the city's quite proud of it, and I imagine residents will be quite proud too that they get this kind of recognition. And one of the programs that cities do have to do to qualify this, is do things to help create an inventory of trees. And the city for the past few years has been doing just that. They've been giving away trees, and they've got a couple giveaways coming up in the next few weeks. They're going to be giving away 375 trees. The first chance to get one is at the Farmers Market on April 26th, the Port Moody Farmers Market down by the rec complex. You can sign up for a tree there, and then on the same day you go and collect your tree from the Public Works Yard, which is kind of around the corner. And another opportunity will happen at the Fingerling Festival, which is Saturday, May 2nd. And residents have to show they live in the city. They're allowed to get one tree and plant it somewhere on the ground. There's different kinds of trees. They vary from small trees to slightly larger ones, but they're all sort of species that will grow in the climate that's around Port Moody. And yeah, hopefully that gets the city towards fulfilling its goal to increase its tree canopy.
And that gets added to the inventory?
I imagine at some point it would, if they
So nobody's going
take root.
Nobody's going to come around and inspect the quality of your green thumb, see how well the tree is doing.
I know, but there are going to be city staff on hand who know about these things and will be able to guide people who pick up their tree on where to plant it and how best to take care of it. So to try and ensure that they have a pretty good chance of surviving and growing.
Well, that would be very important for me. All right. I wanted to now turn to the section of the podcast where we talk about what's been going on with emergency services and our communities, our Freshet 911 segment. So, Has anybody got a Freshet 911 story they want to share?
Well, on Tuesday in the morning, 7 a.m., there was a horrendous-looking crash on Barnett Highway right by the Burnaby refinery access road. According to police, it was a head-on collision, not necessarily bumper to bumper, but they were both going in opposite directions. And apparently one of them was an EV and burst into flames and was fully engulfed. And photos of the scene show, well, one of them shows a fully involved vehicle, but others show one of the cars just completely demolished. So it's pretty miraculous that the two drivers, who were the only occupants, survived. They were taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries, according to Burnaby RCMP. So good news on some level that, I mean, it looked like it could have been so much worse. The road was shut down in both directions for a couple of hours, and then the investigators closed down just the eastbound lanes, but it lasted into the afternoon commute. One of the things I kind of wanted to say is that sometimes maybe people wonder why we put photos of horribly wrecked cars online. And when we were in journalism school, one of the things we were taught is to do things for the public good. Is this for the public good? And one of the things I don't think people quite realize is how vulnerable vehicles are. You know, when everything's going well and everybody's, staying in their lane and nothing happens, we're all fine, and we have this illusion that we're, impervious. But then when you see the results of a wreck, I think it really drives home the need to not take for granted how dangerous a car can be, and how careful you need to be on the road.
Well, I think that photo that we ran from Shane McKitchen of the burned out car in the middle of the road, just all on its own. I mean, it just shows, because the firefighters in your story talked about how difficult it was to fight that fire because of the electric batteries in that car, how dangerous that situation can be, and with the growing number of electric cars around, that's a big problem for firefighters, and it's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just the need to be careful and how a vehicle, in a crash, it's not it's not a tank. We're vulnerable out there. Be careful on the roads.
Okay, well, Janice, let's talk about what's coming up. What's on this weekend and next week?
Well, this weekend we've got 3 really cool events on Saturday, and I wanted to highlight them. The first one is the Kids Sport Tri-Cities bike sale. We've got 170 bicycles at Winslow Center between 10 and 2 that are screaming hot deals. So anything for under $400, including mountain bikes, hybrid bikes, road bikes, kids bikes, and youth trek bikes. And all the proceeds go to help families in need when they want to register their kids for organized sports. And the second one I wanted to mention was, again, another very cool project. This is done by the School District 43 District Sustainability Leadership Committee. And this is the second annual School District 43's clothing swap. Since spring break, the high schools in the Tri-Cities area have collected secondhand clothing from the kids. And what they do is they bring it to Pine Tree Community Center, and they say, anybody who needs clothes, come get it. It's for free. There's a $2 entry charge, which goes to the Sheriff Food Bank. But you can outfit yourself with secondhand goods from kids, fill your boots. And this is from 9 to 3 at the Pine Tree Community Center. And then the last one is at the Massey Theater. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff.
I sure do.
The Shrek musical. This is another spring production by the Royal City Musical Theater Company. Tanner Zare is wearing the green outfit, and we've got lots of local connections on this one. And I will be there on opening night, which is Saturday night, and that is at the Massey Theater, and it runs until May 3rd.
Yeah, and if you're going, look for the Freshet ad in the program.
Indeed.
All right, speaking about sports, because we were a minute ago, bicycles and such. Mario, I saw 2 stories this week of yours that caught my eye. The first one being about the early playoff exits cost the Coquitlam Express coach's job. So maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, hockey's a cruel business, even at the junior level, and you're only as good. Once again, we see you're only as good as your last win. And the Express had another first round exit from the playoffs this year. It's, I think, the fourth year in a row they've been bumped pretty quickly from the postseason, despite having a reasonably good regular season record. They lost to the Chilliwack Chiefs in 5 games. The last loss was last Friday, 3-2 in overtime. And 3 days later, on Monday, the coach, Jeff Wagner, was dismissed. He'd been with the team since 2021, joined as an associate coach, and then was elevated to the interim head coach when the previous coach, whom he worked under, Patrick Sexton, left. Went back to Ontario, I think, is the reason for his departure. He had another job offer there. Young guy, I'd spoken to him several times, and I feel bad for him. I guess when you're in that business, you kind of know that something like that can happen down the road at any point, because it is a business. And the Express have been doing a lot in the last several years to try and solidify their place in the community and become part of the community more so than they were in the past. And for the most part, they've been pretty successful at it. They've built out an entire affiliate or development program. They are expanding their commitment to female hockey. They've built a gym that for their players, creating facilities. I mean, it's very competitive, especially with some of the changing landscape in junior hockey with regards to the Canadian Hockey League and the NCAA, and how the BCHL, which always carved its niche as, oh, you come here instead of to the WHL or the other major junior leagues, and you can go down to the States after a few years and get a college scholarship. Well, now players in the CHL can get college scholarships too, because the NCAA changed their rules, no longer recognizes the CHL as a professional league, because players there get a stipend to help cover living expenses when they're away from home. So now, it's very competitive, and it's and creating a good environment for development of players and facilities, and that is part of attracting top players to a program. So Tally Campbell, the general manager, and Fayez Manji, the owner, have been investing a lot in the team and in building that up. But at the end of the day, it's all about wins and losses. And the longer you last in the playoffs, the more fans come into the arena and help boost the coffers of the team and allow them to do some of the things. So yeah, it's a tough day for the Express and for Jeff, for sure. Talked to Tally, and he said that he will now begin a search for a new coach, hopefully someone a little more experienced who's able to manage the challenges of dealing with young people who may not always be focused on the job at hand. He said, and that's one of the things he said. These kids have to realize when they come here, it's not just to play hockey; it's a job, and they have responsibilities. And he thinks some of that may have gotten away from them previously, and maybe that ended up in not quite performing up to expectations on the ice.
And as one season ends, hockey, another one begins in the form of baseball. And Janice, I saw you had a story about the Coquitlam Reds winning their home opener at Mundy Park.
They did. They won. They had 2 double headers this weekend. They won their first game on Saturday. They lost their second game, and they won their first game on Sunday and lost their second game. And they were playing the Mid-Island Pirates, which is Nanaimo, which has always been a tough team. This is the junior team that's led by Wes Taylor, who is the father of Curtis Taylor, which Mario had mentioned in previous podcasts. Curtis Taylor is a pitcher in Korea, and his dad is the owner and general manager of the Coquitlam Reds. He's also the president of the PBL, the Premier Baseball League, which is basically the fast track to get into college in the States and Canada for baseball scholarships. I'm watching this team very closely, obviously, because my son is a pitcher on this team, and they're doing really well. They're 4-for-4 already, but the Bantam team for the Coquitlam Reds is undefeated. So we'll be watching them as well.
Wow, that's exciting. Well, congratulations to them. All right, so I want to now turn to your favorite stories of the week. So why don't we kick off with you, Theresa? What's your favorite story this week?
I think my favorite story was the one that Mario had written about the Bicycle Museum. A lot of folks in New West are familiar with Gordon Hobbes, and the former owner of Caps Bicycles, and he's opened up a bike museum, and I just some of the information that was in that story, was just really entertaining. It was a really nice read. I did not know that doctors had once warned women of cycling face when they would ride their bikes and encounter wind. So who knew?
I'm actually 35 years old. This is cycling face.
That's some cycling face.
From running downhill very fast.
If you're 35, then I'm 40. All right. Well, with that, Mario, what's your favorite story this week?
I was really touched by Janice's story about the Day of Remembrance for people who've been caught up in the poison drug crisis, toxic drug crisis. I know I've covered people planting flags around Lafarge Lake in the past, and have helped tell their stories. But she talked to a Burnaby resident who had been addicted to crack cocaine, and he shared some of his experiences and challenges of dealing with that addiction, and really moving. And I think it's something we always have to keep in mind, that there are, people are struggling out there with some of these things, and small gestures like seeing purple flags all lined up, and Janice shot some photos. I know that was a rainy, miserable, awful, cold day to be out there and seeing someone so committed to making sure people remember these challenges is pretty moving, and a pretty important thing that we all think about too.
Yeah. No, a good reminder. How about you, Cornelia?
Well, I feel bad because the story I'm going to talk about is my own story. I'm such a history nerd, and buried in the reports that go to various committees and council meetings are always some gems. And mine, the one I found that you'll find in the paper, this edition, is about the Forest Lawn Funeral Chapel, originally called the Little Chapel of Flowers. I learned all kinds of things about it. Actually, I had heard that it was to be demolished, and I actually went down to the cemetery. I couldn't find the thing. It's right in the middle of the Forest Lawn Memorial Park, apparently. So I didn't get to see it up close, but I got to see some excellent photos taken by the heritage consultant that did this report. Anyway, Forest Lawn is going to destroy or demolish its funeral chapel, and going to consolidate all their services in a new building closer to the entrance of the memorial park. And one of the casualties of that is going to be a 64-year-old funeral chapel that was built in 1962. And it's been kind of obscured by an addition, kind of a big addition in the mid 1980s. But underneath it is this cool modernist structure with an interesting spire and an indoor garden that now just has fake plants, but used to have real plants. That was right in the sort of nave or sanctuary area. And it was just really neat to see this. What I like is that because it's not on the heritage register, it's going to be demolished, but the city required this report to be written so that at least it would be part of the record. The consultant that I talked to said he thought the most important, Sam Boisvert, that's what it was, with Donald Luxton and Associates Inc., who did the report, said the most important thing for him is the way that the chapel broke the mold in terms of a modernist approach. It's very horizontal and low-lying instead of kind of pointy like the traditional Christian architecture. So yeah, I really enjoyed digging into that. It takes a certain kind of person to enjoy that kind of report, but I enjoyed it.
Well, and you said, Cornelia, that report puts it into the city record, and the fact that we have that in the Freshet News puts it in the public record too, because I didn't even know about that building. When I laid out that story, the photos were beautiful. I mean, what a lovely building, and what a loss that it could have gone unknown, because who goes into the cemetery unless you need to. And yeah. I remember years ago doing a story about the mausoleum at that cemetery, and it was spectacular too, just walking in there. And often these things are amongst us, and for the most part, you're not aware of them until something like this happens. So having that story in Freshet News and allowing readers and residents to see, oh, this is quite delightful. What a treasure it could have been.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. And I also kind of hope that it's a little bit of a memory for people who may have mourned a loved one there when they were doing
Yeah.
a service, or actually been married there, because they used to also do weddings in the middle of the cemetery, which that's kind of cool.
Wow. How about you, Janice?
It is election season. So we are 6 months into the Freshet, and election season is 6 months away. So I'm already licking my lips over this and getting really excited about who's announcing, what their platforms are. We had a recent announcement in Coquitlam about Harvey Sue. He is running again. He placed 9th in the last election for council seats. So he just missed the last seat. So let's see if he gets it again. So then the names are starting to stack up on who's running, what the visions are for Coquitlam and the Tri-Cities. Interestingly enough, the stories that aren't being reported are kind of my favorites too. The people who are not running, they're telling me, they're sending videos saying that they're not running. That's also interesting to me, because they're making announcements saying that they're not running. So silly season is here, and I love it. It's just the best to find out what people see for their municipality and how they want to change it and how they want to better it.
Yeah, and also for those ones who aren't running, why they're not running.
Yeah.
Now, are we talking incumbents or just random people saying, I'm not running for council?
These are people who ran previously, and they've had a lot of interest. Are you running again? You seem to be raising your profile. And then the next clip that we see is, no, I'm not running.
Oh, so they're people who may not have gotten into office, but who had made a splash in a previous election.
Correct, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Well, the story that caught my eye was actually something that caught a lot of people's eye, particularly people who live near this Burnaby tower with the really bright LED screen. And it was interesting to me that, first of all, they made some complaints about this and how it was keeping them awake, and they got some action. As you said, Cornelia, in the story, that it was ridiculously bright, and that it was closed down, but then was suddenly relit again on March 8th. So it's fascinating to me that this is something that has to come up at the city level to have people actually deal with it. Doesn't seem very neighborly. All right. Thanks again to our team for their great insights on this week's stories, and to all of you for listening. Don't forget to pick up a copy of our latest print edition, which came out just yesterday. Pick it up at your favorite recreation center, grocery store, coffee shop, city hall, or any other Freshet News distribution point. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and we'll see you back here next Freshet Friday.